The October wind carried dust and memories across the abandoned main street of Grafton's Rest, a town that had died when the silver veins ran dry 15 years ago. Elias Boone guided his horse through the skeletal remains of what had once been a thriving settlement, his weathered hands steady on the reins despite the strange flutter in his chest. At 43, he'd spent half his life saving every spare dollar from his cattle ranch, and now he owned an entire town for the price of a good saddle, $100. That's all the county clerk had wanted for the deed to 37 buildings and 200 acres of dust and ghosts. Elias dismounted in front of what used to be the Grafton's Rest General Store, its painted sign now barely readable beneath years of sun and neglect. The wooden boards of the porch groaned under his boots, and somewhere a loose shutter banged against a wall in steady rhythm with the wind. He'd ridden through ghost towns before. The West was littered with them like bones in the desert. But this one was his. He pulled the deed from his coat pocket, smoothing the official paper against his thigh. All buildings, improvements, and fixtures within the township limits of Grafton's Rest, Nevada Territory. The words still seemed impossible. A man who'd grown up with nothing, who'd worked other men's land until his hands were more leather than flesh, now owned an entire town. The sun hung low, painting the abandoned buildings in shades of rust and gold. Elias had planned to make camp in the old hotel, start his survey of the property come morning. But as he stepped off the general store's porch, something made him pause. Smoke, thin and gray. It rose from behind the buildings on the north side of town. Not the thick black of a wildfire, but the careful smoke of a cooking fire. His hand moved instinctively to the Colt 45 at his hip. Ghost towns didn't have cooking fires. Elias led his horse between two collapsed storefronts, following the smoke. Behind the main street, he found something that shouldn't exist. A vegetable garden, small but well-tended, with neat rows of turnips and potatoes, bean poles standing like sentries. A patch of green life in all this death. The smoke came from a stovepipe jutting from the back of the general store. Someone had patched the rear wall with newer boards. Created a makeshift home where commerce had died. Elias could hear movement inside now, the scrape of a chair, the clink of dishes. He was still deciding whether to call out or investigate further when the back door opened. The woman stood framed in the doorway, a Winchester rifle held with practiced ease. She might have been handsome once, but hardship had carved deep lines around her mouth and eyes. Her graying hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her dress, though clean, showed the careful mending of someone who made things last. Elias guessed her age at somewhere past 50, though life in the territories had a way of aging folks beyond their years. "That's far enough," she said. Her voice carried the kind of weariness that came from saying hard words too many times. "Turn around and ride on. Nothing here for you." Elias raised his hands slowly, showing empty palms. "Ma'am, I believe there's been some confusion. My name is Elias Boone, and I know who you are." She didn't lower the rifle. "Sam Hutchins at the land office has a mouth bigger than his sense. Been expecting you for a week. Then you know I own this town, bought it legal and proper." Something flickered in her eyes, fear, maybe, or anger held too long to burn hot anymore. "You own buildings and dirt. Mr. Boone, you don't own people." "Never claimed to, but I do have questions about why there's folks living in my ghost town." "Your ghost town?" She said it like the words tasted bitter. "Men like you always think you own everything." From inside the store came another sound, a child's cough, harsh and wet. The woman's composure cracked for just a moment, her eyes darting back before fixing on Elias again. "You got young ones in there?" Elias asked, his voice gentler now. That's no concern of yours. But the coughing continued, growing worse. Elias could hear the wheeze and struggle of young lungs fighting for air. He'd heard that sound before, in the winter of '71 when half the children in Prescott took sick. Ma'am. Mrs. Kellen. She supplied the name like surrendering ground. Martha Kellen. Mrs. Kellen, that child sounds poorly. When's the last time you had a doctor through? Her laugh was short and humorless. Doctor? Nearest one's in Cedar Falls. 40 miles through Indian country. Might as well be on the moon. The coughing fit passed, replaced by a thin, reedy breathing that was almost worse. Elias took a step forward and Martha raised the rifle higher. I've got medicine in my saddlebags, he said. Laudanum for the cough, willow bark for fever. It's not much, but... Why? The word came out sharp with suspicion. Why would you help? It was a fair question. Elias thought about it. Thought about all the reasons a man might offer kindness in a hard world. Because I've been that sick child. Because I've been the one holding the gun. Afraid of losing the little I had left. Because sometimes the only thing that makes us human in all this emptiness is choosing to be decent when we don't have to be. Martha studied him for a long moment. Behind her, the coughing started again, weaker this time. When she lowered the rifle, it seemed to take all her remaining strength. Hey, Jamie, she said, my grandson, he's 10 years old and all I got left in this world. Elias moved slowly to his horse, aware of her watching every movement. He pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebags, the medicine he always carried after seeing too many folks die for want of simple remedies. Martha led him through the back door into what had been the store's stockroom. She'd made it into a home of sorts, a salvage stove for heat and cooking, 2 narrow beds built from packing crates and worn blankets, a table made from a door laid across barrels. Everything clean, but speaking of a poverty that went bone deep. The boy lay on one of the beds, his face flushed with fever, even sick. Elias could see the resemblance to Martha in the stubborn set of his jaw. The child's breathing came in short, painful gasps. How long has he been like this? Elias asked, kneeling beside the bed. 3 days. Started as a cold, then... Martha's voice caught. Then this. Elias mixed a small dose of laudanum with water. Helped the boy drink. The medicine wouldn't cure him, but it might ease the cough enough to let him rest. He showed Martha how to make willow bark tea, left her with enough medicine for several days. Thank you, she said, the words seeming to cost her. But this doesn't change anything. We've got nowhere else to go. I'm not asking you to leave, Elias said, which surprised them both. But I need to know why you're here, why you're hiding in a dead town. Martha looked at her grandson, smoothed his damp hair with a gentle hand. You really want to know? Then sit. It's an ugly story, and I'm too tired to pretty it up. Elias sat on a crate across from her, waiting. Outside, his horse nickered softly, and the wind continued its lonely conversation with the empty buildings. My husband, Thomas, died 2 years back. Rockslide at the Garrison mine. Left me with Jamie. His parents died of fever the winter before. She paused, gathering the words like scattered coins. We had a little farm outside Cedar Falls. Nothing much, but it was ours. Then Mr. Josiah Hartley from the Cedar Falls Bank came calling. Said Thomas had taken out a loan before he died. Showed me papers with his signature. But he hadn't. Thomas couldn't write his own name. Mr. Boone. I taught him his letters some, but he never got past marking an X. That signature was as fake as a $3 bill. Elias felt a familiar anger building. He'd seen this game played before, banks and land speculators preying on widows and orphans, using legal tricks to steal what honest work had built. I told Mr. Hartley as much, Martha continued. He just smiled and said the law didn't require him to believe me. Said I had 30 days to pay $900 or he'd take the farm. $900, Elias shook his head, might as well have been 9,000. That's what I thought. But then Sheriff Clay Moreland showed up. Said there was another way. Said I could work off the debt. Her hands clenched in her lap. When I asked what kind of work, the way he looked at me, well, I packed what we could carry and left that night. And came here, remembered it from years back when Thomas and I passed through. Figured a dead town was better than what they had planned for us. She looked around the makeshift home. Been here 8 months now. I trap rabbits, grow what I can. Jamie was doing fine until this sickness took him. The boy stirred, mumbling in his fever. Martha went to him, adjusting his blankets with practiced care. Watching her. Elias made a decision that would change all their lives, though he didn't know it yet. Mrs. Kellen, he said, I bought this town to start over, to build something. Seems to me a town needs folks to be more than just buildings. You and Jamie, you're welcome to stay. She turned to him, suspicion warring with hope in her eyes. And what'll that cost us? Not a thing. Though if you're of a mind to run a proper general store once I get this place going again, I'd be willing to discuss terms. Why? That word again, sharp with the knowledge that kindness always had a price. Because I believe your story. Because men like Hartley and Moreland have been feeding off folks' misery for too long. Because... He stopped, almost embarrassed by the truth. Because I bought myself a town, Mrs. and Kellen. But what I really want is a place to belong. Can't have that in empty buildings. Before Martha could respond, they heard it. Horses. Several of them, moving fast down the main street. Martha's face went white as old bone. They found us, she whispered. Elias stood, checking his colt. Stay with the boy. I'll see what this is about. But he already knew. Some troubles had a way of following folks, no matter how far they ran. And as he stepped out to face whatever was coming, Elias Boone realized his $100 ghost town had come with more than he'd bargained for. The sun was setting now, painting the sky the color of blood and promises. In the distance, the horses had stopped. Men's voices carried on the wind, confident and cruel. Sheriff Clay Moreland had come to Grafton's Rest. Elias Boone stepped onto the main street of Grafton's Rest with measured calm, though his hand rested easy near his holster. The dying light stretched his shadow long across the dusty ground, and he counted 3 riders stopped in front of the old hotel. Their horses stood lathered and restless, suggesting hard riding from Cedar Falls. The man in the lead sat his mount like someone accustomed to looking down on others. Sheriff Clay Moreland wore his authority like a well-tailored coat, from the polished star on his vest to the ivory-handled peacemaker at his hip. He was younger than Elias had expected, maybe 35, with the kind of good looks that opened doors and closed minds. His 2 deputies flanked him, one thin as a fence post with nervous eyes, the other built like a prize bull with scarred knuckles that spoke of enjoying his work too much. Evening, gentlemen, Elias called out, stopping a careful distance away. Something I can help you with? Moreland smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Well now, you must be Mr. Boone. Heard you bought yourself our little ghost town. He looked around with theatrical interest. Have to say, you got swindled, friend. Nothing here but dust and memories. A man's got to start somewhere. Name's Elias, and you'd be? Sheriff Clay Moreland, Cedar Falls. He touched his hat brim in mock courtesy. These are my deputies, Lem Garrett and Big Tom Dudley. We're here on official business. Cedar Falls is 40 miles from here, Elias observed. Long ride for official business in a dead town. Not so dead as we thought, apparently. Moreland's smile sharpened. See, we're tracking a fugitive. Woman named Martha Kellen. Stole near $900 from the Cedar Falls Bank and lit out 8 months back. Had a feeling she might be holed up here. That's a serious accusation. Got the papers to prove it. Moreland reached into his coat, pulled out a folded document. Loan agreement with her husband's signature and a warrant for her arrest when she defaulted and ran. Elias didn't move to take the papers. Seems strange, a woman with a sick child stealing that kind of money. What did she do with it? That's for the court to determine. Moreland's patience was wearing thin. Now, Mr. Boone, I know you just got here, so I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But harboring a fugitive is a serious crime. Best thing you can do is point us in her direction and let the law handle this. And if I told you I haven't seen any woman or child? Big Tom Dudley shifted in his saddle, leather creaking. His hand moved closer to his gun. Then we'd have to wonder if you're lying to law officers, he rumbled, voice like gravel in a bucket. Tom. Moreland's word was sharp. Mr. Boone here is a law-abiding citizen. I'm sure he understands the importance of cooperation. He looked back at Elias. Don't you? Elias weighed his options. 3 armed men, experienced and ready for violence. In the back of the general store, a sick child and a desperate woman. The badge on Moreland's chest might be real, but Elias had learned long ago that legal and right weren't always the same thing. Sheriff, he said finally, I bought this town fair and square. Everything in it belongs to me now. If you want to search my property, you'll need more than just your say-so. Lem Garrett laughed, high and nervous. He's got sand. Clay, give him that. But Moreland's face had gone cold. Mr. Boone, you seem like a reasonable man. So let me be reasonable with you. That woman owes a debt. In Cedar Falls, we take debt seriously. Now you can make this easy or... A child's cough cut through the evening air, harsh and distinctive. All 4 men turned toward the sound, coming from the direction of the general store. Well now, Moreland said softly. Sounds like someone's poorly. Elias stepped forward. Sheriff, that's enough. You've made your point. But I'm telling you now, leave the woman and child be. Whatever debt you think exists, taking it out on them won't make you whole. Won't make me whole? Moreland laughed. Mr. Boone, I don't think you understand how things work in Cedar Falls. Mr. Josiah Hartley owns the bank. He owns the mill, the largest ranch, and half the businesses in town. When someone steals from Mr. Hartley, they steal from all of us. Look. And what's Hartley paying you to recover his money? Elias asked. Or is it not about the money at all? Big Tom's hand went to his gun, but Moreland raised a hand to stop him. That's a dangerous accusation, friend. Not accusing, just observing. Seems to me if a woman owed money, you'd put a lien on her property, sell it at auction, but you ran her off instead. Makes a man wonder what you're really after. The standoff stretched taut, 4 men measuring each other in the dying light. Then, from the general store, came footsteps. Martha Kellen emerged, still carrying her Winchester, her jaw set with desperate courage. Let them be, Sheriff, she called out. I'm the one you want. Martha, no, Elias said, but she kept walking, placing herself between the men and the store where Jamie lay sick. Mrs. Kellen. Moreland tipped his hat with exaggerated politeness. You've led us quite a chase. I didn't steal anything, and you know it, Martha said. That signature was forged. Thomas couldn't write. That's for a judge to decide, though I doubt you'll find one sympathetic to your claims. Moreland's smile was predatory. Course. Mr. Hartley might be willing to work out an arrangement. You come back with us peaceful-like, and maybe we can forget about adding fleeing arrest to your charges." "What kind of arrangement?" Elias asked, though Martha's face told him she already knew. "Mr. Hartley's a widower," Moreland said easily. "His household needs managing, hard work, but honest, better than prison, certainly. And the boy would be looked after in an orphanage," Martha spat, "while I'm trapped in that man's house, subject to whatever—" She stopped, hands trembling on the rifle. Elias had heard enough. He'd known men like Hartley and Moreland all his life, men who used the law as a weapon, who took what they wanted and called it justice. The anger that had been building in him since Martha told her story crystallized into cold resolve. "Sheriff Moreland," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who'd made his decision. "Mrs. Kellen and her grandson are under my protection. They're my tenants now, living on my property with my permission. You want them. You'll need proper warrants. And even then, you'll have to go through me." "Your tenants?" Moreland's voice dripped disbelief. "You just met this woman. A man's got a right to rent his property to whoever he chooses. Filed the paperwork in the county seat this morning." It was a lie, but Elias delivered it with stone-faced certainty. "Dated yesterday before you arrived. Makes this harassment of my lawful tenants." Lem Garrett shifted nervously. "Clay, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Lem." Moreland's mask of civility was slipping. "Mr. Boone, you're making a serious mistake. I've got legal papers. You're interfering with a lawful arrest." "No, sir," Elias corrected. "I'm protecting my property and my tenants from armed men who rode in here without announcing themselves, making threats. Way I see it, you're the ones breaking the law." Big Tom Dudley finally spoke up. "Let me explain it to him proper, Sheriff." His hand moved to his gun again. But Elias was ready this time. His Colt cleared leather smooth as silk, not pointing at anyone but ready. "That would be a mistake, Tom. I've put down rabid dogs before, don't make me do it again." "Everyone calm down," Martha said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "No one needs to die here." From inside the store, Jamie's coughing grew worse, each breath a struggle. Martha's composure cracked, her head turning toward the sound. Moreland saw it too. "That boy sounds real sick, Mrs. Kellen. Shame you can't get him to a doctor. Of course, if you came with us willingly, I'm sure Mr. Hartley would see he got proper care." "You bastard," Martha whispered. "Just a concerned citizen," Moreland replied. "Hate to see a child suffer for his grandmother's poor choices." Elias felt the situation balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word, one twitchy finger, and the street would run red. He thought of the boy inside, fighting for each breath, and made a calculated gamble. "Sheriff, you say you're a lawman, so let's handle this lawfully. You go back to Cedar Falls, get your warrants properly served and witnessed. Bring them back here with a territorial judge, not just your bought and paid for local magistrate. We'll settle this in court, proper and legal. And the woman? It stays here on my property until you do things right. She's not going anywhere. Where would she go with a sick child?" Moreland studied him for a long moment. "You've got spine, Boone, but spine won't stop a bullet. Neither will a badge, Sheriff. And I've got friends too. The kind who ask questions when a man who just bought a town turns up dead." Another lie. But Elias had learned that confidence sold more lies than truth ever could. The silence stretched between them, taut as telegraph wire. Finally, Moreland nodded slowly. "All right, Mr. Boone. We'll do this your way. For now." He looked at Martha. "But this isn't over. That debt will be paid, one way or another." He turned his horse, and his deputies followed. At the edge of town, Moreland paused, looking back. Enjoy your ghost town, Boone. But remember, ghosts have a way of haunting the living. They rode off into the gathering darkness, leaving dust and threats in their wake. Elias didn't lower his gun until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. "They'll be back," Martha said quietly. "I know. Why did you do that? You don't even know us." Elias holstered his Colt, suddenly feeling every one of his 43 years. "Ma'am, I've been pushed around by men like that my whole life. Always had to take it because I had nothing to push back with. Now I own a town." He managed a tired smile. "Seems like a good place to make a stand." Martha's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Jamie needs a doctor. He's getting worse." "We'll figure something out," Elias promised, though he wasn't sure how. "For now, let's get back inside. Night's coming, and we need to prepare for what comes next." As they walked back to the general store, Elias looked around his ghost town with new eyes. He'd wanted a fresh start, a place to build something lasting. Instead, he'd found a fight he hadn't expected and people who needed him more than he'd needed anything in a long time. Inside, Jamie's labored breathing filled the small space. Elias knelt beside the boy, feeling the heat radiating from his small body. The child's eyes fluttered open, unfocused with fever. Who are you?" Jamie whispered. "A friend," Elias said, "just a friend." Martha sat on the other side of the bed, taking her grandson's hand. "The men are gone, honey, you're safe. Did they come to take us away?" "No one's taking you anywhere," Elias said firmly. This is your home now." The boy managed a weak smile before the coughing took him again. Elias met Martha's eyes over the child's struggling form. They both knew the truth. Without proper medicine, without a doctor, Jamie might not last much longer. "There's an old trading post," Martha said suddenly, "about 15 miles north, run by a man named Ezra Walsh. He trades with the Paiute. They might have medicine, healers who know things white doctors don't." 15 miles through rough country, Elias said. "Can the boy travel?" "He'll have to." Elias nodded, already planning. "We'll leave at first light, rig up a travois to keep him comfortable, but Martha, Moreland will be watching the roads. Then we'll have to be careful." They spent the rest of the evening preparing, gathering supplies and rigging a travois from old boards and blankets. Martha showed Elias around the makeshift home she'd created, the small touches that made it more than just a shelter. Jamie's school books carefully preserved, a Bible with pressed flowers between the pages, a daguerreotype of a younger couple that must have been Jamie's parents. "You've done well here," Elias said, "making a home from nothing." "A woman does what she must," Martha replied. "For family, there's nothing I wouldn't do." As the night deepened, they took turns sitting with Jamie, cooling his fever with damp cloths, helping him sip water mixed with what little medicine remained. The boy drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for his mother, sometimes mumbling about horses and sunny days that existed only in his fever dreams. During one of Martha's turns, Elias stepped outside to check on the horses and think. The stars spread above Grafton's Rest like scattered silver dollars, and the desert cold bit through his coat. Somewhere out there, Moreland was planning his next move. Somewhere, a rich man named Hartley was counting money that wasn't his and planning to take even more. Elias had come here for solitude, for a chance to build something without interference. Instead, he'd found himself in the middle of a fight that wasn't his but had become his the moment he'd looked into Martha Kellen's desperate eyes and seen his own past reflected there. A sound made him turn. Martha stood in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl against the cold. "You can't sleep?" he asked. "Haven't slept proper in 8 months." She joined him in looking at the stars. Mr. Boone, Elias, what you're risking for us is my choice to make. But why? Really why? And don't give me that speech about belonging. You could have that without us bringing trouble to your door. Elias was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. When I was 15, my family had a small farm in Missouri. Wasn't much, but it was ours. Then the war came. Not the fighting, that was bad enough, but the men who came after wearing badges and carrying papers, taking what they wanted because they could. They took our farm for unpaid taxes that we'd never owed. My father tried to fight it legal-like. They shot him on the courthouse steps. Called it resisting arrest. Martha's hand found his arm, a gentle touch of understanding. My mother died that winter, just gave up. I've been drifting ever since, working other men's land, saving every penny for a chance to have something they couldn't take. He gestured at the empty town around them. Thought I'd found it here. But seems like men like Moreland and Hartley are everywhere, taking what isn't theirs because they can dress theft up in legal papers. So you're fighting your old fight through us? Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of seeing good people ground down by bad men with badges. He looked at her. Either way, I'm not backing down now. Jamie's all I have left, Martha said softly. If he dies. He won't. We'll get him help, get him well. Then we'll deal with Moreland and Hartley and anyone else who thinks they can take what's ours. Ours? Martha asked, a faint smile touching her lips. This town needs people to be more than empty buildings. You and Jamie, you've already made it more of a home than I could alone. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two people brought together by circumstance but bound now by something stronger. The shared determination to protect what mattered, to stand against those who would take everything and call it law. Inside, Jamie's coughing had quieted, his breathing still labored but more regular. The medicine had bought them time, but not much. Come dawn, they would have to move, have to risk everything on a dangerous journey to save a child's life. But for now, in the quiet darkness of Grafton's Rest, they had this moment of peace. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, Moreland's return, the dangerous journey, the fight for Jamie's life. But tonight, in a ghost town that was no longer quite so empty, two lonely people had found something worth fighting for. And sometimes, Elias thought as he watched the stars wheel overhead, that was enough to start with. Everything else, justice, belonging, home, all of that could come later, if they survived what was coming. The first light of dawn painted the desert in shades of rose and gold as Elias finished securing Jamie to the travois. The boy had survived the night, but his breathing came in short, painful gasps that sent fear through both adults. Martha had packed what medicine they had left, along with water and provisions for the journey to Ezra Walsh's trading post. Trails rough for the first 5 miles, Martha said, checking the makeshift stretcher one more time. After that, it smooths out some until we hit Skeleton Ridge. Elias nodded, studying the landscape ahead. The October morning carried a chill that would burn off soon enough, but for now, it was perfect traveling weather. He'd scouted the route in the pre-dawn darkness, looking for signs of Moreland's men. Nothing yet, but that didn't mean they weren't being watched. We'll take it slow, he said, no sense jarring the boy more than necessary. They'd barely made it past the abandoned stamp mill at the edge of town when the sound reached them, horses, moving fast from the south. Elias's hand went to his rifle, but Martha was already pointing to a cluster of rocks off the trail. Behind there, she whispered, quick! They guided the horses into cover just as the riders came into view. Not Moreland this time. These were different men, harder looking, wearing long dusters that didn't quite hide the arsenal they carried. 5 of them, led by a man with silver conchos on his hatband and cold eyes that swept the landscape like a hawk searching for prey. "That's Jake Harmon," Martha breathed. "Hartley's enforcer, does the dirty work even Moreland won't touch." The riders reined up near where Elias and Martha had left the trail. Harmon dismounted, studying the ground with practiced ease. "Fresh tracks," he called to his men. "Two horses and something being dragged. They're close." One of his men, a scarred Mexican with twin colts, spoke up. "¿Por qué no esperamos al sheriff, jefe?" He said to let him handle it legal. Harmon spat tobacco juice onto the dusty ground. "Legal's for when witnesses are watching. Out here, accidents happen. Woman tries to run with a sick kid, gets lost in the desert." He shrugged. Tragic story. Jamie chose that moment to cough, the sound muffled but still audible in the morning stillness. Harmon's head snapped up, a predator catching scent. "Mount up," he ordered. "They're in those rocks." Elias made a quick decision. "Martha, take Jamie and head for that arroyo to the north. I'll buy you time. You can't face 5 men alone." "I don't plan to face them at all. Just lead them off, and now go." She didn't argue further, knowing every second counted. As she guided her horse away, leading the travois carefully over the rough ground, Elias mounted up and burst from cover in the opposite direction. "There!" one of Harmon's men shouted. "He's making a run for it!" The chase was on. Elias pushed his horse hard across the broken landscape, bullets whining past as Harmon's men opened fire. He zigzagged between Joshua trees and boulder fields, using every trick he'd learned from years of working cattle in rough country. A bullet took his hat off. Another creased his shoulder, burning like a brand. But he kept riding, leading them away from Martha and Jamie, deeper into the maze of canyons that riddled this part of the territory. Behind him, Harmon shouted orders, trying to coordinate his men. But Elias knew this type of country better than city-bred enforcers. He'd spent years reading the land, understanding how water carved stone, how to find passages where none seemed to exist. He guided his horse up a narrow wash, hooves clattering on water-smooth stones. At the top, the wash split 3 ways. Elias took the middle path, then immediately dismounted and slapped his horse's rump, sending it continuing up the canyon. He scrambled up the loose scree to a ledge 20 feet above, Winchester in hand. Harmon's men thundered into view moments later. At the split, they paused, studying the ground. "Which way?" the Mexican asked. "You two, take the left," Harmon ordered. "Miguel, go right. We'll take the middle." Perfect. Divided. They were manageable. Elias waited until Harmon and his remaining man were directly below, then levered around into the chamber. "That's far enough, gentlemen." Both men looked up, hands moving toward their guns. "I wouldn't," Elias said conversationally. "This Winchester holds 15 rounds, and I'm a fair shot. You might get me, but I'll definitely get you." Harmon's smile was without humor. "Well played, Mr. Boone, but you can't hold us forever. My men will circle back. Maybe, but by then, Mrs. McKellen will be long gone. That woman owes a debt." "That woman owes nothing to you or Hartley." Elias cut him off. "We both know what this is really about. Hartley wants the land, and he wants the woman. The debt's just paper to make it legal." "Illegal's all that matters," Harmon said. "You can't fight the law." "I'm not fighting the law. I'm fighting men who hide behind it." A sound echoed up the canyon, horses returning, but not from where Harmon expected. These came from the north, and there were more of them, many more. The first rider to appear was Sheriff Clay Moreland himself, but he wasn't alone. Behind him rode not just his 2 deputies, but another 6 men. Most surprising of all, riding beside Moreland was a portly man in an expensive suit, mopping his face with a silk handkerchief despite the morning cool. "Josiah Hartley," Harmon said, and for the first time he sounded uncertain. "Indeed," the banker replied, his voice carrying the cultured tones of Eastern education. "Jake, I specifically told you to wait for the sheriff. Yet here you are, shooting up the countryside like some common brigand." "Mr. Hartley, You were just making a mess of things as usual." Hartley turned his attention to Elias. "Mr. Boone, I presume? You can come down. Despite appearances, we're not here to harm you." Elias kept his rifle ready but scrambled down from the ledge. As his boots hit the ground, Moreland's men spread out, effectively surrounding him. "Seems like a lot of firepower for a social call," Elias observed. "These are troubled times," Hartley said. "A man of means must protect himself. Now, shall we discuss this situation like civilized men?" "Nothing to discuss. Mrs. Kellen is under my protection." "Ah, yes, your tenants." Hartley's smile was as cold as a banker's heart. "I took the liberty of checking the county records this morning. Surprisingly, no such rental agreement exists. Takes time for paperwork to—" "Please, Mr. Boone, let's dispense with fiction. You're protecting the woman out of some misguided sense of chivalry. Admirable, in its way, but ultimately futile." Moreland spoke up. "Mr. Hartley's being generous here, Boone. He could have you arrested for interfering with the law, harboring fugitives, attempted murder of his men." "No one's been murdered," Elias said, "though your boy Harmon here seemed inclined to arrange some accidents." Hartley's eyes flicked to Harmon, something dark passing between them. "Jake sometimes exceeds his instructions, but that's neither here nor there. Mr. Boone, I'm prepared to make you an offer. Not interested. You haven't heard it yet." Hartley dismounted with surprising grace for his size. "I know you paid $100 for Grafton's Rest. I'll give you $500, a $400 profit for, what, 2 days ownership? Take it and ride away. Find another ghost town to play with. And Martha Kellen. That's really none of your concern. She owes a lawful debt. How she chooses to repay it is between her and me." Elias felt anger building but kept his voice level. "No deal." "I thought you might say that," Hartley sighed theatrically. "Sheriff Moreland, I believe Mr. Boone is currently trespassing on my land." "Your land?" Elias frowned. "This is open range." "He was open range," Moreland corrected, producing another set of papers. "Mr. Hartley purchased the mineral rights to this entire section last month. That includes surface access. You're trespassing armed and threatening Mr. Hartley's legally appointed agents." "That's a 2-year prison sentence," Hartley added helpfully. "Territorial prison. I hear it's quite unpleasant." The trap was neat. Elias had to admit, they'd planned this carefully, covering every angle with legal papers and technical violations. Men like Hartley didn't get rich by leaving things to chance. "Of course," Hartley continued, "if you were to reconsider my offer, I'm sure the sheriff could be persuaded to overlook this unfortunate misunderstanding." Before Elias could respond, one of Moreland's deputies pointed north. "Riders coming!" Everyone turned to look. 3 horses approached at a gallop, and Elias's heart sank as he recognized Martha's slight form. But she wasn't fleeing. She was riding straight toward them, and she wasn't alone. The man beside her was massive, with shoulders that strained his buckskin shirt and skin burned dark by desert sun. Behind them, leading Martha's horse with the travois, rode a younger man who bore enough resemblance to be his son. "Samuel Standing Bear," Harmon muttered. "What's that Indian doing here?" They reined up just outside the circle of guns. The big man, Standing Bear, surveyed the scene with calm intelligence before speaking in perfectly accented English. "Gentlemen, I'm transporting a sick child to my grandfather's healing lodge. These people are under the protection of the Washoe Nation. I trust there won't be any problems?" Hartley's face had gone red. "You have no authority here. Indian. This is a matter of American law." "Actually," Standing Bear said, "this particular canyon is on the boundary of reservation land. The Treaty of 1863, Section 4, subsection 12. Would you like me to quote it exactly?" "He's bluffing," Harmon said. "Am I?" Standing Bear smiled. "By all means, test it, and of course that would require soldiers from Fort Churchill to sort out. Meanwhile, the child grows sicker. Are you really prepared to let a boy die over paperwork? Mr. Hartley, isn't it?" Martha spoke for the first time. "Jamie's dying. Every minute we waste here brings him closer to the end. Is that what you want? Mr. Hartley, the blood of a child on your hands?" "The boy's condition is unfortunate," Hartley said stiffly, "but hardly my responsibility." "Everything's your responsibility," Martha shot back. "You're the one who drove us from our home with false papers and forged signatures. You're the one who sent armed men after a woman and child like we were animals to be hunted. You owe a legal debt. I owe you nothing." The words burst from Martha with 8 months of suppressed fury. "My husband couldn't write his name. That signature was a lie, and everyone here knows it. You wanted our land because it had good water, and you thought a widow would be easy prey." "Be careful, woman," Moreland warned. "Slander's a serious charge." "Truth isn't slander, Sheriff, though I doubt you'd recognize truth if it bit you." Elias watched the exchange, noting how Hartley's men shifted uneasily. Even hard cases like Harmon seemed uncomfortable with the situation. Hunting a woman and sick child was different from facing armed men. It sat wrong, even with those used to dirty work. Standing Bear's son spoke up. "The child's fever is very high. If we don't move soon—" "Then move," Hartley snapped. "Take the boy. The woman stays." "The woman comes with us," Standing Bear said firmly. "She is the boy's only family. To separate them would be cruel." "The law—" "Your law," Standing Bear interrupted. "Not ours. And as I said, the jurisdiction here is complicated." Elias saw his chance. "Mr. Hartley, you're a businessman. Let me propose a business solution." The banker's eyes narrowed. "I'm listening." "Give me 30 days. Let Mrs. Kellen tend to her grandson, get him well. In that time, I'll work to settle this debt issue properly. If I can't find a legal solution that satisfies everyone, I'll pay the $900 myself." "You have that kind of money?" "I'll get it." Hartley considered. "And if you can't?" "Then Mrs. Kellen surrenders herself voluntarily. No chase, no violence. She'll return to Cedar Falls on her own." "Elias, no," Martha protested, but he held up a hand. "It's the best offer you'll get," he told Hartley. "Think about it. Right now, you're the man who hunted a woman and dying child through the desert. That's the story that'll spread. Bad for business, bad for your reputation. But if you show mercy, give them time," he shrugged, "might even make you look noble." Moreland started to object, but Hartley silenced him with a gesture. The banker was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He could see the situation balanced on a knife's edge, could feel his own men's discomfort with hunting a sick child. 15 days, he countered, and Mrs. Kellen remains in the territory. If she runs, the deal's off. 30 days, Elias insisted. The boy needs time to recover. 21. 3 weeks, final offer. Elias looked at Martha, saw her tiny nod. Done. I'll want that in writing, Hartley said. Sheriff Moreland will witness it. After we get the boy to help, Standing Bear said, time is wasting. Hartley nodded curtly. Very well. But remember, Boone, 21 days, not an hour more. And if you're thinking of finding some legal trickery to void that debt, think again. I have judges in 3 counties who owe me favors. I'm sure you do, Elias said, but maybe, just maybe, justice is bigger than your reach. Oh, justice? Hartley laughed, a sound with no mirth. Justice is what men with power say it is. You'd do well to remember that. He mounted his horse with the same surprising grace, his men forming around him. Moreland lingered a moment longer. 21 days, Boone. I'll be counting everyone. Then they were gone, disappearing back down the canyon in a cloud of dust and the echo of hoofbeats. Elias sagged slightly, only now feeling how tense he'd been. That was either very brave or very stupid. Standing Bear observed. Probably both, Elias admitted. But thank you for your help. The big man smiled. Martha helped my sister 2 winters ago when the government supplies didn't come. We remember our friends. He looked at the travois where Jamie lay. Now, let's get this boy to my grandfather. He's waited long enough for healing. As they prepared to continue the journey, Martha moved her horse close to Elias's. 21 days, she said quietly. What can possibly change in 21 days? I don't know, Elias admitted, but it's 21 more days than we had. Sometimes that's enough to start with. They rode north together, toward the reservation in hope of healing. Behind them, the morning sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows in the canyon. But other shadows remained, the shadow of debt, of powerful men who bent the law to their will, of time running out like sand through an hourglass. 21 days. Elias had bought them that much. Now he just had to figure out how to make it count. The healing lodge of Samuel Standing Bear's grandfather stood in a grove of cottonwoods near a natural spring, one of the few places in this harsh land where water ran year-round. The old medicine man, introduced simply as Grandfather Joseph, took one look at Jamie and immediately set to work, his gnarled hands moving with surprising gentleness as he examined the boy. The sickness has gone deep, he said in English accented with Washoe rhythms. But not too deep. The boy's spirit still fights. Martha hadn't left Jamie's side since they'd arrived, holding his hand as Grandfather Joseph prepared his medicines. Elias stood outside the lodge with Standing Bear, watching the sun sink toward the western mountains and trying not to think about how quickly days could pass. 21 days, Standing Bear said, as if reading his thoughts. You've taken on a heavy burden, friend. Seemed like the right thing at the time, Elias replied. Now I'm not so sure. $900 might as well be 9,000. Money isn't always the answer. My people learned that when the white man's government tried to buy our sacred lands. Standing Bear studied him. What will you do? I don't know yet, but I'll figure something out. I have to. Inside the lodge, Jamie's coughing had finally quieted under the influence of Grandfather Joseph's herbs. The old healer emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. The boy will live, he announced, but he needs rest, good food, and time. The white man's sickness went deep because his body was already weak from poor nutrition and stress. How long? Martha asked, emerging behind him, her face drawn with exhaustion but showing the first real hope Elias had seen. 2 weeks before he can travel safely. Perhaps more. 2 weeks. That would leave them only 1 week to solve the debt problem. Elias felt the weight of time pressing down like a physical thing. You're all welcome to stay. Standing Bear offered, but I should warn you, Hartley has influence even here. Some of our tribal council take his money. Not all, but enough to make trouble if he pushes. We can't bring your people into our fight, Martha said. You've done enough already. Perhaps, but the fight was already here. Hartley wants the water rights to our spring. He's been pressuring the Indian agent to renegotiate the treaty boundaries. Standing Bear's smile was grim. So you see, helping you helps us too. That night, as Jamie slept peacefully for the first time in days, Elias and Martha sat by the spring talking quietly. The moon had risen, turning the water to molten silver. "I can't let you pay that debt," Martha said. "It's not real, and even if it was, it's not your responsibility." "I made it my responsibility when I stood between you and Moreland." "Why?" She turned to face him fully. "I need to understand why you're doing this, the real reason." Elias picked up a stone, rolled it between his fingers. "You ever feel like your whole life has been leading to a moment, even if you didn't know it? That's how I felt when I saw you standing in that doorway with your rifle, ready to fight the whole world for that boy." "That's not an answer." "No, I suppose it's not." He threw the stone into the spring, watched the ripples spread. "Truth is, I've been running from something for near 30 years. Not from the law or debts or any of that. From the fact that when they killed my father, I didn't fight back. I was young, scared, but that doesn't change it. I let them take everything. You were a child. I was old enough to hold a gun, old enough to make a choice. I chose to live, to run, to spend 30 years telling myself that someday I'd make things right." He looked at her. "Maybe this is that someday. Maybe you and Jamie are my chance to finally stop running." Martha was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took his hand, her touch warm and calloused from hard work. "We all carry our ghosts. Elias, the trick is not letting them carry us." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the moon's reflection on the water. It was a simple moment, but Elias felt something shift inside him, some wall he'd built around his heart starting to crumble. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Elias was helping Standing Bear's son, Thomas, tend to the horses when a rider approached. A small, nervous-looking man in a city suit entirely unsuited to the desert. "Mr. Boone?" he called out, mopping his face with a handkerchief. "Elias Boone?" "Who's asking?" "My name is Clarence Bidwell. I'm a lawyer from Carson City." He dismounted awkwardly, nearly falling in the process. "I've been looking for you for 2 days. They said in Grafton's Rest you'd come this way." "If Hartley sent you." No, nothing like that. I'm here about your father's estate." Elias felt the world tilt slightly. "My father's been dead 30 years. Yes, I know, but there's been a development." Bidwell fumbled in his saddlebags, producing a leather folder. "Your father filed a claim against the men who took his farm. It's been sitting in the courts all this time, working its way through appeals. Last month, the Federal Circuit Court finally ruled in your father's favor. Posthumously, of course. The taking was deemed illegal. The men responsible were ordered to pay damages plus interest." Bidwell opened the folder, showed Elias a sheaf of legal documents. "As his only surviving heir, you're entitled to the settlement." Elias stared at the papers, not quite believing. "How much?" "After legal fees and court costs, approximately $1,200. The irony of it hit Elias like a physical blow. All these years. And his father had been fighting even after death. Fighting through the courts, through the law, the slow grinding wheels of justice finally turning. "There is one minor problem," Bidwell continued. "You need to appear in person to claim the funds, in Carson City, within—" He checked his papers. 10 days, or the money reverts to the state." 10 days. Elias did the math. Carson City was 3 days hard riding each way. That left 4 days for whatever legal procedures were required. It could be done, but barely. "I'll need to think about it," Elias said. Bidwell looked confused. "Think about it? Mr. Boone, this is $1,200. Surely—" "I said I'll think about it. Where are you staying?" "The hotel in Cedar Falls. I'll wait 3 days for your decision." The lawyer remounted with the same awkwardness he'd shown dismounting. "I hope you'll make the right choice, Mr. Boone. Your father fought very hard for this justice." After Bidwell left, Elias found Martha in the healing lodge, applying cool cloths to Jamie's forehead. The boy was awake, his color better, but still weak. "I need to tell you something," Elias said. He explained about the lawyer, the settlement, the money that could solve all their problems. Martha listened without interrupting, her face carefully neutral. "You have to go," she said when he finished. "It means leaving you alone. If Hartley decides to break his word, Standing Bear will protect us, and Hartley's a businessman, and he'll wait for his money." She managed a smile. "Besides, Jamie's getting stronger every day. We'll be fine." "Martha." "Hey, go, Elias, get your father's justice. Now pay off this false debt. End this." He wanted to argue, but she was right. This was their chance, maybe their only chance. But something nagged at him, some instinct honed by years of disappointment. "What if it's a trap?" he asked. "What if Hartley found out somehow, sent this lawyer to lure me away? Then we'll deal with it. But you can't live your life afraid of shadows." She touched his face gently. "Your father fought for 30 years after death to give you this. Don't let fear steal it now." That afternoon, Sheriff Moreland arrived with 2 men Elias didn't recognize. They wore the severe black suits of federal officials, and their faces had the humorless cast of men who dealt in regulations rather than reality. "Mr. Boone," Moreland said, clearly unhappy about something. "These gentlemen are from the Indian Agency. Seems there's some question about jurisdiction here." The taller of the 2 officials, who introduced himself as Agent Horace Pemberton, pulled out a map. "Mr. Standing Bear, according to our surveys, this spring is actually outside the current reservation boundaries." "Your surveys are wrong," Standing Bear said flatly. "Perhaps, but until that's determined officially, we'll need you to relocate any non-tribal members immediately." Pemberton's smile was as cold as a banker's handshake. "I'm sure you understand." "I understand plenty," Standing Bear replied. "I understand that Mr. Hartley has been generous with his donations to the Indian Agency. I understand that boundaries seem to shift whenever water or mineral rights are involved." "That's a serious accusation." "It's an observation," Standing Bear cut him off. "But fine, we'll play your game. How long do we have?" 48 hours to file an appeal, during which time no non-tribal members can remain on disputed land." Elias felt the trap closing. Without the protection of the reservation, Martha and Jamie would be vulnerable. But if he didn't go to Carson City, they'd lose their only chance at the money. "He will leave immediately," Elias said. "Elias, no," Martha protested. "We don't have a choice." He looked at Standing Bear. "Thank you for everything. We'll work this out another way. This isn't over," Standing Bear promised. "I'll file the appeal, fight this through proper channels. But it will take time. Time they didn't have." As they prepared to leave, Elias pulled Standing Bear aside. "I need a favor. I have to go to Carson City on urgent business. Can you—" "I'll watch over them," Standing Bear promised. "Not on the reservation, but there are other places, safe places. Hartley's reach isn't infinite." "Thank you." They left within the hour. Jamie bundled carefully on the travois, still weak but stable. Grandfather Joseph had given them a supply of medicines and careful instructions. They made camp that night in a box canyon 10 miles from the reservation, a place Standing Bear had described with careful detail. "You should leave at first light," Martha told Elias as they sat by their small fire. "Ride hard. Every day counts now." "I don't like leaving you, and I don't like being left, but we don't always get what we like." She tried to smile. "Jamie's improving. We'll be careful. You just get that money and come back to us." "Us?" Elias repeated. "I like the sound of that. Don't get sentimental on me now. Elias Boone. We've got too much at stake for that." But later, when Jamie was asleep and the fire had died to embers, she came to sit beside him, not speaking, just being there. The desert night wrapped around them, vast and full of stars. "When this is over," Elias said quietly, "when the debt's paid and Jamie's well, what then?" "I don't know. I've been running so long I've forgotten what it's like to stop. Maybe we could find out together, build something in Grafton's Rest, make that ghost town live again." "Maybe," she said. "Ask me again in 21 days. He left before dawn, saddling his horse in the gray pre-light while Martha made coffee and tried not to cry. Jamie was awake, propped up on his blankets. "Mr. Elias?" the boy called softly. "Oh, you're coming back, right?" "I'm coming back," Elias promised. "You just focus on getting well. Your grandmother needs you strong." "Hey, she needs you too," Jamie said with the simple wisdom of children. "She smiles when you're around." Elias looked at Martha, saw the truth of it in her eyes before she turned away. "Take care of each other," he said. Then he was mounted and riding, pushing hard toward Carson City and a 30-year-old justice that might save them all. Behind him, the sun rose over the desert, painting the world in shades of hope and gold. But even as he rode, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he was riding away from something precious, something that might not be there when he returned. The money could solve their legal problems, but some things couldn't be bought or sold. Some things could only be chosen, moment by moment, day by day. And as the miles stretched out before him, Elias Boone made his choice. He would ride to Carson City, claim his father's justice, pay Martha's debt. But then he would return, not just to settle a legal matter, but to build something new from the ashes of the old. A home, a family, a future in a ghost town that was learning to live again. If they could survive the next 21 days. The night was thick with desert cold when they came, not Hartley's men, but others who moved through the darkness like ghosts themselves. Martha woke to the sound of horses, many horses, approaching their hidden canyon camp. She reached for her Winchester, then heard a voice call out, "Mrs. Kellen, don't shoot, we're friends." The lead rider emerged into the dying firelight, a woman of perhaps 40 years, wearing men's clothing and a determined expression that Martha recognized. It was the look of someone who'd been pushed too far and decided to push back. "Ruth Hardin," the woman introduced herself. "We met once, at the Harvest Festival 2 years back. Before everything." Martha lowered the rifle slightly. "I remember. Your husband worked the Garrison mine until the cave-in that killed him and 6 others. Same one that took your Thomas." Ruth dismounted, and Martha could see now that she led a group of about 15 people, men and women both, some with children sleeping in their arms. "We heard Elias Boone stood up to Hartley for you. Heard he was trying to find a legal way to fight back. How did you find us?" "Standing Bear. He said you might need help, and we surely need hope." Ruth gestured to her companions. "Every one of us lost our land to Hartley's schemes, forged papers, false debts, threats when we wouldn't sell. We've been living rough, moving from place to place, but we're tired of running. An older man stepped forward, his face gaunt with hardship. Named Silas Fletcher. Had a ranch north of Cedar Falls until Hartley decided he needed my water rights. When I wouldn't sell, suddenly I owed back taxes I'd already paid. Sheriff Moreland came with an eviction notice and a smile. Same story, different details. Another woman added, "My husband signed a loan guarantee for his brother. When the brother died, Hartley claimed we owed the full amount. Showed papers my husband swears he never signed." Martha felt Jamie stir beside her, awakened by the voices. She pulled him closer, protective instinct warring with a growing anger at these shared stories of injustice. "Why are you here?" she asked. "What do you want from us?" Ruth and Silas exchanged glances. "We have someone you need to meet," Ruth said. "Someone who can prove what Hartley's been doing. But he's scared. Won't come forward alone. We thought maybe if you heard his story." From the back of the group, a thin man was pushed forward. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his clothes dusty and his hands shaking. Martha recognized him. Samuel Briggs, the head clerk from Cedar Falls Bank. "Mrs. Kellen," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, but I'm so sorry for my part in what happened to you." "Your part?" Briggs sank onto a rock near the fire, looking older than his 30-some years. "I kept the books. 2 sets, one for the bank inspectors, one for Mr. Hartley. I know where every forged document is hidden, every false debt recorded." He looked up at her with haunted eyes. "I know because I helped create them." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of confession. "Finally," Martha spoke, her voice carefully controlled. "Why?" "He had things on me, gambling debts from when I was young and stupid. Said he'd ruin me, have me jailed. I had a wife, children." Briggs trailed off. "But that's no excuse. I helped him steal from good people, helped drive families from their homes." "And now?" Ruth asked, "and what's changed?" "My wife left me, took the children. Said she couldn't live with a man who'd sold his soul for a steady wage." Briggs laughed bitterly. "She was right. And when I heard about that boy," he nodded toward Jamie, "sick and hunted because of papers I helped forge, I couldn't do it anymore." Martha felt rage and pity war within her. This man had helped destroy her life, but he was also a victim of Hartley's web. "Can you prove it?" she asked. "What, in court?" "I have documents hidden in a safe deposit box in Virginia City, under my mother's maiden name. Copies of the real books, examples of the forgeries, correspondence between Hartley and various officials he's bribed." Briggs reached into his coat, pulled out a small key. "This opens it. Everything you need to destroy him is in that box." "Then why haven't you?" "Because going to the authorities means going to men Hartley owns. The territorial prosecutor takes his money. Half the judges are in debt to his bank. Even if I testified, who would believe a confessed forger over a respectable banker?" Ruth spoke up. "That's why we need more than just testimony. We need public pressure, newspaper coverage, federal involvement, and we need someone respectable to champion our cause." "Elias," Martha breathed. "He owns property, has no debt to Hartley, no criminal record, if he presents the evidence." Silas nodded. It might be enough, but Martha was already shaking her head. "He's in Carson City. Won't be back for days yet. Actually," a new voice said from the darkness, "he's right here." Elias stepped into the firelight, leading his exhausted horse. He looked like he'd ridden through hell, dust-covered, hollow-eyed, but very much present. "Elias." Martha was on her feet, then stopped, uncertain. "But Carson City was a trap," he said grimly. "Oh, the lawyer was real enough. and so was the settlement. But when I got there, I found Hartley had already been there. He'd filed an injunction, claiming the money was connected to debts my father owed to various creditors, all of them mysteriously connected to Hartley's bank. He sat heavily by the fire, accepting the cup of water Ruth offered. It would take months to sort out, maybe years, time we don't have. So I rode back, hard as I could push, figured if I couldn't win with money, maybe I could find another way. Mr. Boone, Briggs said, standing nervously. My name is... I heard, Elias cut him off, but not unkindly. I was listening from the rocks, wanted to make sure this wasn't another trap. He looked at the key in Briggs' hand. Virginia City's a day's ride. We've got, he calculated, 13 days left. It's not enough time, Ruth said, even with the evidence, building a legal case. Who said anything about legal? Elias smiled, but it was sharp-edged. Hartley's been using the law as a weapon. Maybe it's time we did the same. He looked around the group, these displaced people who'd found each other in their shared misery. How many more are there? People Hartley's cheated? Dozens, Silas said, or maybe more, scattered across 3 counties. And if they all came forward at once? If we made it public, really public? Martha began to understand. A gathering, like a town meeting, but bigger. In Grafton's Rest, Elias continued. My town. Bring everyone. The cheated, the displaced, but also journalists, honest lawmen from other jurisdictions, maybe even a federal marshal if we can find one. Make it too big to ignore, too public to suppress. Hartley won't allow it, Ruth warned. He'll send Moreland, probably Harmon and his guns. Let him. The more force he uses, the worse he looks, and this time, we'll be ready. Elias turned to Briggs. Can you get those documents? Yes, but, Mr. Boone, if I testify, I'll go to prison too. I'm guilty. Maybe, but confession and cooperation might earn leniency. Either way, you'll be able to look your children in the eye again. Briggs nodded slowly, resolution replacing fear in his expression. They spent the rest of the night planning. Ruth and Silas would spread word to the displaced families. 2 of the younger men would ride to nearby towns, seeking honest journalists and lawmen. Briggs would retrieve his evidence, with an escort to ensure his safety. As dawn broke, painting the canyon walls in shades of rose, the group dispersed on their various missions. Soon only Elias, Martha, and Jamie remained. You came back, Martha said simply. Said I would. But the money, your father's justice. My father spent 30 years fighting through the courts. Maybe he'd understand that sometimes justice needs to happen outside courtrooms. Elias moved to check on Jamie, who was sitting up now. Color better than it had been in days. How are you feeling, son? Better, Mr. Elias. Grandma says I might be able to ride a horse soon. That's good. We might need to move fast when the time comes. Martha touched his arm. This is dangerous. If Hartley realizes what we're planning, he'll realize soon enough. But by then, hopefully, it'll be too late to stop. He met her eyes. I need to ask you something. If this works, if we beat Hartley and void the debt, what then? Will you stay in Grafton's Rest? Are you asking me to stay? I'm asking if you want to, you and Jamie both, help me build something there. It's a real town, a real home. Before Martha could answer, Jamie piped up. I'd like that. Could I have my own room? And maybe a dog? Jamie, Martha scolded, but she was smiling. A boy needs a dog, Elias said seriously. And his grandmother needs a proper house, not a converted storeroom. You're assuming a lot, Mr. Boone. Am I? She looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd risked everything for strangers, who'd chosen justice over safety, who'd come back when he could have taken his father's money and disappeared. "No," she said softly, "you're not." Over the next days, Grafton's Rest transformed. Families began arriving, tentatively at first, then in a steady stream. They came in wagons loaded with meager possessions, on horseback, some even on foot. Each brought a story of loss, of legal theft dressed up in official papers. Elias organized them with military efficiency. The old hotel was cleaned and opened to house families. The abandoned saloon became a meeting hall. Guards were posted on the roads, watching for Hartley's men. On the 10th day, Briggs returned with a locked strongbox, pale but determined. That same evening, 3 journalists arrived, one from San Francisco, drawn by the promise of a story about frontier corruption. "This is bigger than I expected." The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Chen, told Elias, "If even half these stories are true, they're true, we have proof. Then you have a powder keg. The question is whether the explosion takes down Hartley or all of you." On the 12th day, Sheriff Moreland arrived with a small army, 20 men, all armed, all wearing hastily made deputy badges. He found the town full of people, including the journalists with their notebooks ready. "This is an illegal assembly," he announced from horseback. "You're all trespassing on Mr. Hartley's property." "Actually," Elias said, stepping forward with papers of his own, "I've been doing some research. Turns out Mr. Hartley's claim to the mineral rights in this area was never properly recorded. The territorial secretary confirms it. This is still my town." "Sheriff," Moreland's face darkened, "you're harboring fugitives. I have warrants." "For people who owe legitimate debts," Margaret Chen interrupted, pencil poised. "Or for people who've been cheated by forged documents. I'm sure my readers would love to know which." "Who are you?" "Margaret Chen, San Francisco Chronicle, and you are?" Moreland looked around, saw more journalists, saw families who'd lost everything watching him with hard eyes. He also saw armed men among them, not many, but enough to make any violence costly. "Mr. Boone," he said finally. "Mr. Hartley is willing to discuss terms. Perhaps we can resolve this without unpleasantness. The only terms I'm interested in are full confession and restitution to everyone he's cheated." "That's not going to happen." "Then we have nothing to discuss. You're welcome to stay and witness what happens tomorrow." That's when Mr. Briggs will be presenting his evidence to a federal marshal who's riding in from Sacramento. It was a bluff. They'd sent for a marshal but had no guarantee one would come. But Moreland didn't know that. "This isn't over," the sheriff warned, but he pulled his men back, camping just outside town, watching, waiting. That night, as the displaced families gathered in the saloon to share food and stories, Elias found Martha standing outside, looking at the stars. "Tomorrow Hartley comes," she said. "He won't let this challenge stand." "I know. We could still run, take Jamie and disappear and let someone else fight this battle. Is that what you want?" She turned to him. "I spent 8 months running, living in fear, jumping at shadows. I don't want Jamie to grow up that way." She took a breath. "So no, I don't want to run. I want to stand and fight. With you. Even if we lose. Even then. Because at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have stood up and said no more." Elias pulled her close, and she didn't resist. They stood together under the vast Nevada sky, 2 people who'd found each other in a ghost town, who'd chosen to fight for justice and for each other. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation they all knew was coming. Hartley wouldn't give up his empire without a fight. But tonight, in a town coming back to life, surrounded by others who'd chosen to stand rather than run, They had this moment. And sometimes, Elias thought as he held Martha close, a moment was enough to build a future on. The 13th day dawned with an ominous stillness. No wind stirred the dust of Grafton's Rest, and even the desert birds seemed to hold their breath. Jamie's fever had returned during the night, worse than before, and Martha hadn't left his side since. It's the stress. Grandfather Joseph's grandson, Thomas Standing Bear, said quietly to Elias. He'd arrived before dawn with more of his grandfather's medicine. The boy was healing, but all this tension, this fear, it's making him worse. Elias knelt beside Jamie's bed in the hotel room they'd prepared. The boy's face was flushed, his breathing shallow and rapid. Martha held his hand, whispering prayers and promises. "We need a real doctor," she said without looking up. "The herbs aren't enough anymore." "The nearest doctor is in Cedar Falls," Elias reminded her gently. "Hartley's town." "I know." Her voice was steady, but he could see her hands trembling. "I know what it means." Before Elias could respond, Ruth Harden burst through the door. "They're coming!" Hartley himself, with what looks like a small army. Elias stood checking his Colt. How many? 30, maybe 40 men, all armed. Ruth's face was grim. And Elias, Clay Moreland's riding alone to meet them. Something's happened. Outside, the displaced families were gathering, some armed, all determined. The journalists had their notebooks ready, and Margaret Chen had somehow procured a camera, its bulk balanced on a tripod near the saloon. Sheriff Clay Moreland rode into town 20 minutes ahead of Hartley's force. He looked different, older somehow, as if the weight of his choices had finally settled on his shoulders. He dismounted in front of the hotel where Elias waited. "Mr. Boone," he said formally, "I need to speak with you privately. Whatever you have to say." Please," the words seemed to cost him. "It's about the boy." That got Elias's attention. He led Moreland into the abandoned assay office, guns ready but not drawn. The sheriff removed his hat, ran fingers through his hair. "I have a grandson," Moreland said without preamble. "Lives with his mother in Kansas. He's about Jamie's age." He looked at Elias. "I've done things, Mr. Boone, things I'm not proud of. Told myself it was just business, just following orders. But when I heard that boy was sick again—" "What are you saying, Sheriff?" Moreland reached into his coat, and Elias tensed. But what emerged was a leather folder, which the sheriff placed on the dusty table between them. "Hartley keeps records of everyone he owns. Politicians, judges, lawmen like me, details of bribes, favors, things that could ruin us all." He tapped the folder. "This is his insurance policy, kept in his private safe. I took it last night." Elias opened the folder carefully, scanning the contents. Names, dates, amounts, a comprehensive record of corruption spanning 3 counties and reaching as high as the territorial government. "Why?" Elias asked. "Because I looked at my deputy star this morning and couldn't remember why I'd wanted it in the first place. Because I thought about my grandson and what kind of world I'm leaving him." Moreland's laugh was bitter. "Because even a bought dog can choose to bite the hand that feeds it. Hartley will destroy you for this." "Probably, but that boy needs a doctor, and the only one within 50 miles is old Doc Cartwright. He's a good man, owes Hartley nothing. I sent word, he's coming. And Hartley is about 10 minutes behind me, mad as hell and ready for war." Moreland settled his hat back on his head. "I'll stand with him because I have to. Keep up appearances. But when the time comes, my gun won't clear leather. You have my word. Your word hasn't meant much until now." "No," Moreland agreed, "and it hasn't. Maybe it's time that changed." He left as suddenly as he'd come, mounting up and riding back toward the approaching dust cloud. Elias stared at the folder in his hands, enough evidence to bring down not just Hartley, but an entire network of corruption. "Elias," Silas Fletcher called from outside. "They're here." Josiah Hartley rode at the head of his force like a general reviewing troops. He'd abandoned any pretense of the cultured banker, wearing rough clothes and a gun belt that looked well used. Jake Harmon flanked him, along with men Elias recognized as hired guns from 3 territories. But it was the wagon that followed that made Elias's blood run cold. Mounted on the bed was a Gatling gun, its multiple barrels gleaming in the morning sun. Hartley reined up in the center of town, his men spreading out in a semicircle. The displaced families pulled back but didn't scatter, forming their own defensive line. Between them stood the journalists, including a photographer who was already setting up his equipment. "Mr. Boone," Hartley called out, "I've come to collect what's mine. The woman Martha Kellen owes a lawful debt. Time's up." Elias stepped onto the hotel porch, very aware of the Gatling gun's barrels. "The debt's fraudulent, and you know it. I know what the law says, and the law says she owes $900 or her freedom." Hartley's smile was cold. "Of course, given the trouble you've all caused, that price has gone up. Call it interest." "How much?" "The woman, free and clear. Plus this town, you'll sign it over to me. Plus every one of these squatters leaves the territory." He gestured at the displaced families. "Today." "And if we refuse?" Hartley nodded toward the Gatling gun. "Then we'll have a tragedy." Desperate squatters attacked lawful representatives of the Cedar Falls Bank. We had no choice but to defend ourselves. In front of journalists, in front of witnesses. "What witnesses? I see trespassers and co-conspirators." Hartley's voice hardened. "You've played your hand, Boone, but I hold all the cards." "Do you?" a new voice asked. Samuel Briggs stepped out of the crowd, no longer the frightened clerk, but a man who'd found his courage. Behind him came Thomas Standing Bear and several Washoe warriors. "Mr. Briggs," Hartley said, his voice dangerously quiet, "you've been missing from your post. I've been gathering evidence." Briggs held up a thick ledger. "Every forged document, every bribe, every family you've destroyed, and it's all here. The word of a confessed embezzler? No court would believe you." "Maybe not." Margaret Chen spoke up, stepping forward with her notebook. "But they'll believe this." She held up a photograph. Somehow, impossibly, she'd captured an image of Moreland passing the folder to Elias through the assay office window. "Sheriff Moreland has already provided corroborating evidence. My paper will run the story regardless of what happens here." Hartley's face went white, then red. "Moreland?" The sheriff sat his horse stiffly, not meeting Hartley's eyes. "The boy's dying. Even you aren't worth a child's life." "You stupid!" Hartley reached for his gun. 3 things happened simultaneously. Elias drew his Colt with the speed of long practice. Thomas Standing Bear raised a rifle. And from the hotel, a small voice cried out, "Grandma!" Everyone froze. In the doorway stood Jamie, supported by Martha, pale and shaking but standing on his own feet. Doc Cartwright appeared behind them, medical bag in hand. "The boy's crisis broke," the doctor announced. "He'll recover with proper care." Something shifted in that moment. The hired guns looked uncertain. They'd signed on to roust squatters, not murder a sick child in front of journalists and photographers. Even Jake Harmon seemed uncomfortable. Hartley saw it too, saw his carefully built empire crumbling. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I own judges, politicians—" "Not anymore," Elias said, holding up Moreland's folder. "This lists everyone you've bought, everything you've done. It's over. Hartley. You think you've won? I'll burn this town to the ground before I let you. Mr. Hartley. The voice came from the edge of town. A lone rider approached, a man in a black suit wearing the badge of a U.S. Marshal. He was older, grizzled, with eyes that had seen too much and judged it all. Marshal John Pritchard, he introduced himself. Got an interesting telegram yesterday. Something about conspiracy, fraud, and corruption involving a territorial bank. Thought I'd ride down and investigate. Marshal, these people are... I know who they are. Pritchard dismounted with deliberate slowness. Question is, who are you? Because from where I sit, you look like a man leading an armed invasion of private property. I have legal documents. So do I. The marshal produced his own papers. Federal warrant for the arrest of one Josiah Hartley on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and corruption of public officials. Seems someone in the Justice Department has been very interested in your activities. Elias looked at Margaret Chen, who smiled slightly. Her connections ran deeper than just newspaper editors, it seemed. Hartley looked around wildly, seeing his men edge away, his empire collapsing. Harmon, do something! But Jake Harmon was already wheeling his horse around. Sorry, boss, I don't fight federal marshals, bad for business. One by one, the hired guns dispersed, leaving Hartley alone except for Moreland and his two original deputies. The sheriff looked at the marshal, then at Hartley, and made his choice. Josiah Hartley, he said formally, you're under arrest. What followed was almost anticlimactic. Hartley was taken into custody, raging about lawyers and connections that no longer mattered. Briggs turned over his evidence to Marshal Pritchard. The displaced families began to breathe again, some crying, some cheering. But in the hotel, a quieter drama played out. Jamie lay in bed, weak but improving, while Doc Cartwright gave instructions to Martha. He needs rest, good food, and no more stress. The doctor said, that means a stable home. Mrs. Kellen, no more running. She'll have that, Elias said from the doorway. Here in Grafton's Rest, if she'll stay. Martha looked at him, then at Jamie, who was smiling despite his exhaustion. What do you think, sweetheart? Should we stay? Can I have that dog Mr. Elias promised? I think that can be arranged, Elias said. Doc Cartwright packed his bag, then paused. You know, this town could use a doctor. Mine in Cedar Falls is about to have a vacancy. Doubt many will want to stay once Hartley's crimes come to light. You'd be welcome, Elias said. We're rebuilding here. Could use all the help we can get. As the doctor left, Elias sat beside Martha, both of them watching Jamie drift into healing sleep. It's really over, Martha said softly. This part is, now comes the hard part, building something better. Together? If you'll have me, I know we haven't known each other long. Elias Boone, she interrupted. You faced down an army for us. You gave up your father's money for us. You brought a federal marshal down on one of the most powerful men in the territory. I think I know you well enough. Outside, the displaced families were already making plans. Some would stay and help rebuild Grafton's Rest. Others would return to reclaim their stolen lands. But all would remember the day they stood together and won, as the sun set over the desert, painting the ghost town in shades of gold and promise. Elias reflected on the strange turns life could take. He'd bought a dead town looking for solitude and found instead a community. He'd thought he was running from his past and discovered he was running toward his future. What are you thinking? Martha asked. That sometimes the best things in life cost more than money. Sometimes they cost courage. And what did this cost you? He looked at her, at Jamie sleeping peacefully, at the town coming alive outside the window. $100 and 21 days of fear. Bargain of a lifetime. She laughed, the sound like water in the desert. Elias Boone, you're either the smartest man I've ever met or the luckiest. Maybe both, he said, taking her hand. Maybe both. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal proceedings, rebuilding, the slow work of justice. But tonight, in a ghost town that was ghost no more, they had won something precious, the right to stay, to build, to hope. And in the end, that was worth any price. The morning after Hartley's arrest dawned clear and bright, as if the desert itself was celebrating. But in the abandoned saloon that served as a makeshift courthouse, the real battle was just beginning. Marshal Pritchard had set up a temporary office, and a stream of people waited to give testimony about Hartley's crimes. This is just the beginning, Pritchard told Elias as they watched Samuel Briggs painstakingly go through ledgers with a federal prosecutor who'd arrived on the morning stage. Hartley's got lawyers already telegraphing from San Francisco. They'll fight every charge. Let them fight, Elias said. We've got the truth on our side. Truth doesn't always win in court, Mr. Boone. You know that better than most. It was true. Elias thought of his father fighting for 30 years through legal channels for justice that came too late. But this felt different. This time, they had evidence, witnesses, and most importantly, public attention. Margaret Chen had been busy. Her telegraph reports had sparked interest from papers across the country. Frontier David defeats banking Goliath, read one headline. Ghost Town rises against corruption, proclaimed another. The story had captured something in the public imagination, perhaps because everyone knew a Hartley, a man who used law as a weapon against those who could least afford to fight back. In the hotel, Jamie was improving daily under Doc Cartwright's care. The crisis had passed, leaving him weak but clear-eyed. Martha rarely left his side, but when Elias entered with breakfast, he found her standing by the window, watching the activity in the street below. Silas Fletcher's family arrived this morning, she said. His wife and 3 children. They're moving into the old mercantile building. That's 4 families now who've decided to stay. Elias noted. 5 if you count the Washingtons. They're fixing up the blacksmith shop. People need hope, Martha said softly. For so long, we've all been running, hiding, just trying to survive. Now. She turned to him. Now they're talking about schools and churches and proper stores. They're planning for a future. Our future too, Elias asked. Before Martha could answer, Jamie spoke up from his bed. Mr. Elias, when I'm better, could you teach me to ride proper like the way cowboys do? I'd be honored, Elias said. Every young man should know how to sit a horse properly. And rope cattle and shoot? Jamie, Martha warned, but she was smiling. Well, a man's got to know how to protect what's his, Jamie said with 10-year-old seriousness. That's what Mr. Elias did. He protected us. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the window, they could see a familiar figure dismounting from a dusty horse, Sheriff Clay Moreland, but he no longer wore his badge. I'll handle this, Elias said, but Martha caught his arm. I'm coming with you, no more hiding. They found Moreland in the saloon, hat in hand, facing a hostile crowd. Ruth Harden and several others looked ready to violence, but Marshal Pritchard's presence kept things civil. Say your piece, Moreland, the marshal ordered. I've come to testify, Moreland said simply. About Hartley, about what he's done, all of it. A bit late for conscience, isn't it? Ruth spat. After you helped him rob us all. Yes, Moreland agreed. It is late, but maybe not too late. He looked around the room. meeting the eyes of people he'd helped destroy. I can't undo what I've done, but I can tell the truth now. About the bribes, the forged documents, the threats. I was there for most of it. I can corroborate Briggs's testimony. And what do you want in return? Elias asked. Nothing. I know I'll likely face charges myself. I'm prepared for that. Moreland's shoulders straightened slightly. I had a visitor last night, my daughter, come from Kansas. She brought my grandson. Boy's 8 years old. And when he looked at me, his voice broke slightly. I couldn't bear for him to grow up knowing his grandfather as a bought man who stood by while children suffered. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Martha stepped forward. Sheriff, Mr. Moreland, what you did was wrong. The fear, the pain you caused. She took a breath. But Jamie lived because you sent the doctor. That matters too. Thank you, ma'am. More than I deserve. Marshal Pritchard took charge. Moreland, you'll be in protective custody until the trial. Your testimony could be crucial. He looked around the room. Anyone else ready to come forward? What followed was a flood. People who'd been too frightened to speak began telling their stories. Not just about Hartley, but about the entire system that had allowed him to flourish. Corrupt judges, bought politicians, lawmen who looked the other way. The network of greed and power that had crushed so many. Among the most damning testimony came from an unexpected source. Jake Harmon's segundo, the scarred Mexican named Miguel Vasquez. I am tired of being the boot that crushes decent people, he said in accented but clear English. Mr. Harmon, he likes to hurt people, gets paid extra for it. I have seen things. He produced a small leather journal. I keep records, names, dates, what was done, for insurance, you understand? The journal was a catalog of violence done in Hartley's name. Beatings, barn burnings, intimidation that crossed into torture. Even hardened frontier folk were shaken by some of the entries. Where's Harmon now? Marshal Pritchard asked. Gone to Mexico, probably. He is not stupid, knows when to run. As the day wore on, the saloon transformed into something unprecedented. A people's court, where the powerless finally had voice. Margaret Chen and the other journalists scribbled frantically, trying to capture it all. But even as hope grew, danger remained. That evening, as Elias made his rounds of the town's defenses, habits died hard. He found Thomas standing bare on watch at the north end of town. Trouble? Elias asked. Maybe. My scouts report riders moving in the hills. Not approaching, just watching. Hartley's men. Some. Others are harder to place. Men with no allegiance except to gold. Standing Bear checked his rifle. Hartley has friends who won't want him talking. A man in jail can be made silent. You think they'll try to break him out, or make sure he never reaches trial? Either way, we should be ready. They spent the night strengthening defenses, posting guards, preparing for an attack that didn't come. But in the morning, they understood why. A lone rider approached under a white flag. A well-dressed man who introduced himself as Augustus Thornberry, attorney at law from San Francisco. I represent certain interests, he said smoothly, who are concerned about the recent upheaval. My clients are prepared to make a generous offer to resolve this situation without further unpleasantness. What kind of offer? Marshal Pritchard asked. Full restitution to all affected parties. Every fraudulent debt forgiven, every stolen property returned. Additionally, compensation for hardships endured, shall we say, $500 per family. And in return, Mr. Hartley is allowed to leave the territory, quietly. The investigation ends here. No further names are pursued. Thornbury's smile was cold. My clients value their privacy. Your clients, Ruth Harden said with disgust, the men who backed Hartley, who profited from our misery. A business is business, madam. But now the business has become unprofitable. My clients wish to cut their losses. No deal, Elias said flatly. Their justice isn't for sale. Everything is for sale, Mr. Boone. The only question is price. Thornbury looked around the room. Think carefully. My clients have resources. They can make life very difficult for a small town trying to rebuild. Or they can be helpful. Investment, development, prosperity. The choice is yours. Get out, Martha said quietly. Get out before we forget we're civilized people. Thornbury left, but his threat lingered. They all knew the type of power he represented, money that flowed like water, influence that reached everywhere. Fighting Hartley was one thing. Fighting the system that created him was another. That night, the attack finally came. Not on the town, but on the makeshift jail where Hartley was being held in the abandoned bank building. Masked riders, professional and efficient, overwhelmed the guards and blasted open the cell. But they found it empty. He moved him an hour ago, Marshal Pritchard explained to Elias later, showing the cuts and bruises from the fight. Figured something like this might happen. He's already on his way to Carson City under federal guard. Smart thinking. He'd been doing this a while. Know how desperate men think. Pritchard lit a cigar, winced at the pain in his ribs. This isn't over, you know. The trial will be long, ugly. Hartley's friends will try everything to stop it. Then we'd better be ready. The next weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Witnesses were deposed, evidence catalogued, security arranged. The town began to transform as well. New businesses opened, families arrived, life returned to streets that had been empty for years. Jamie recovered fully, spending his days following Elias around, learning about horses and cattle and the 100 skills needed for frontier life. Martha reopened the general store, stocking it with goods brought by the increasing stage traffic. One evening, as Elias helped her arrange supplies on the shelves, she said quietly, I've been thinking about your question, about our future, and this trial, everything that's happening, it could all fall apart. Hartley could go free, his friends could destroy everything we're building. They could try, but you'll fight them. We will fight them, together. She smiled then, the expression transforming her face. Yes, together. That's my answer. Elias, whatever comes, we face it together. The day before the trial was set to begin in Carson City. A celebration was held in Grafton's Rest. The ghost town that had been purchased for $100 now housed 40 families, with more arriving weekly. The saloon served actual drinks. The hotel had real guests, and children played in streets that had known only wind for years. You did this? Martha told Elias as they watched Jamie race with other children, his laughter bright in the evening air. You brought this place back to life. We all did. Every person who stood up to Hartley who refused to run anymore. He put his arm around her. I just wanted a place to belong. Turns out belonging isn't about places, it's about people. Standing Bear approached, accompanied by Doc Cartwright and Ruth Harden. The marshals are here to escort the witnesses to Carson City. It's time. The trial would be a circus. They all knew. Newspapers from across the country were sending reporters. The territorial governor would attend. It would be the kind of spectacle that could change things, could send ripples across the frontier where too many Hartleys operated with impunity. Whatever happens, Elias addressed the gathered crowd. We've already won something. We've proven that ordinary people can stand against injustice. That community is stronger than corruption. that sometimes David really can defeat Goliath. Pretty speech, Clay Moreland said. He stood at the edge of the crowd, still under guard but allowed this moment. But Goliath had a lot of brothers. You ready for that fight? Are you? Elias asked. Moreland considered, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I think maybe I am. Finally. As the sun set over Grafton's Rest, no longer a ghost town but a living community, Elias looked at the people around him. Martha, strong and determined. Jamie, healthy and happy. The families who'd found hope in a place that had seemed dead. $100, he murmured. What's that? Martha asked. Just thinking about investments. Some pay off in money. The best ones pay off in life. She squeezed his hand. Come on, investor, we have a trial to get to. Justice to see done. And after? After we come home, we build, we live, she smiled. We make sure Jamie gets that dog. As they prepared for the journey to Carson City, Elias took one last look at his town. The buildings were still weathered, the streets still dusty. But there was life here now, and purpose, and hope. Sometimes, he thought, the greatest treasures were the ones you never expected to find. And sometimes the best $100 you ever spent was on a ghost town that turned out to be not so dead after all. The journey to the Washoe Healing Grounds took most of the day, with Jamie wrapped in blankets on the travois, drifting in and out of consciousness. The October sun beat down mercilessly, but Thomas Standing Bear led them through shaded canyons and along hidden springs, paths known only to his people, to his. My grandfather is old, Thomas explained as they rode. Maybe the oldest of our people. But his knowledge of healing goes back generations. If anyone can help the boy. Elias glanced back at Martha, who rode beside the travois, never taking her eyes off Jamie. The boy's breathing had grown more labored, each exhale a whistle through congested lungs. They'd already used the last of the laudanum, and the willow bark tea seemed to have no effect. The healing ground surprised Elias. He'd expected something primitive, but found instead a well-organized camp near a hot spring, with several permanent structures built from stone and timber. Elder men and women moved with purpose between the buildings, and the air smelled of sage and other herbs he couldn't identify. Grandfather Joseph emerged from the largest structure, a man so ancient his skin seemed like leather stretched over bird bones, but his eyes were sharp as obsidian. He took one look at Jamie and began issuing rapid orders in Washoe. Bring him, Thomas translated. Quickly! They carried Jamie into what Elias realized was a sophisticated healing lodge. Beds lined the walls, some occupied by other patients. A central fire pit sent smoke up through a cleverly designed opening, and shelves held hundreds of containers filled with dried plants, roots, and substances Elias couldn't identify. Grandfather Joseph examined Jamie with gentle efficiency, listening to his chest, checking his eyes and throat, feeling the heat of his skin. His expression grew grave. The white man's lung sickness, he said in heavily accented English. Gone deep, very deep. He looked at Martha. How long has he been sick? 4 days with the worst of it, but he's been weak for months, not enough food, living in the cold. The old healer nodded. The sickness attacks the weak, but... He studied Jamie intently. The boy's spirit is strong. He fights. That is good. Can you help him? Martha's voice was barely a whisper. I can try, but you must understand my medicine is not the white man's medicine. It works with the spirit as much as the body. The boy must want to live. He does, Martha said fiercely. He has so much to live for. Grandfather Joseph began his work. He prepared a steam tent over Jamie's bed, filling it with aromatic vapors from boiling herbs. He made poultices for the boy's chest, mixtures that seemed to ease his breathing. Most importantly, he sat beside Jamie and sang, low, rhythmic chants that seemed to reach past consciousness to something deeper. The songs call his spirit back. Thomas explained quietly to Elias, "Sometimes, when the body is very sick, the spirit begins to wander. The songs remind it why it should stay." Hours passed. Martha never left Jamie's side, adding her own whispered prayers to Grandfather Joseph's chants. Elias found himself pacing outside, feeling useless. The sun was setting when Thomas joined him. "Your woman is strong," the Washoe man observed. "She's not my woman," Elias corrected automatically, then wondered why he'd said it. Thomas smiled. "No? Then why do you look at her like a man dying of thirst looks at water?" Before Elias could answer, they heard it, a sound that made his heart stop. Silence. The terrible wheeze of Jamie's breathing had ceased. He rushed inside to find Martha sobbing, Grandfather Joseph's hand on her shoulder. But then he saw Jamie's chest still rose and fell, but smoothly now, without the awful struggle. "The crisis breaks," the old healer said. "Now we wait. If he survives the night, he will recover." It was the longest night of Elias's life. He and Martha took turns sitting with Jamie, cooling his fever, helping him sip the herbal teas Grandfather Joseph prepared. Sometime near dawn, exhausted, they found themselves sitting together on a bench outside the healing lodge. "I can't lose him," Martha said. "He's all I have left of my son, of Thomas, of the life we built before Hartley destroyed it all. You won't lose him. He's a fighter like his grandmother." She leaned against him then, too tired to maintain her usual walls. "I'm tired of fighting, Elias. So tired of being strong all the time. Then let me be strong for a while. Rest." She dozed against his shoulder as the sun rose over the desert mountains. Elias held still, not wanting to disturb her, thinking about the strange turns life took. A week ago, he'd been a loner with a deed to a dead town. Now, "Mr. Boone?" He looked up to find Grandfather Joseph standing before them, a slight smile on his ancient face. The boy wakes, he asks for his grandmother. Martha was on her feet instantly, rushing inside. Elias followed to find Jamie propped up on furs, pale but alert, his breathing clear. "Grandma," he said weakly, "I'm hungry." Martha laughed through her tears, holding him carefully. "Of course you are. You're a growing boy." Grandfather Joseph provided a thin broth, explaining that Jamie's recovery would take time. "He must stay here several days, build strength. The sickness is broken, but he is weak." "We're grateful," Elias said. "What do we owe you?" The old man waved dismissively. "The Washoe do not sell healing, but—" His eyes twinkled. "Your town, this Grafton's Rest. Thomas tells me you welcome all people? Anyone willing to work and live in peace. Good. Some of our young people, they want to learn the white man's ways, work with cattle, build with wood and stone. Perhaps they could come work for you? They'd be welcome, more than welcome. Then we are even." As Jamie slept, gaining strength with each hour, Elias found himself walking with Martha along the hot spring. The mineral-scented steam rose around them like a blessing. "I owe you everything," Martha said quietly. "You could have turned us away that first day. Should have, probably. Instead, I found something I didn't know I was looking for." She stopped walking, turned to face him. What was that? A reason to stop running, a reason to build instead of just survive. He took her hands. "Martha, I know this is too fast, too sudden. But when I thought we might lose Jamie, when I saw your strength and your pain, I realized something. What? That $100 for a ghost town was nothing. But what I found there, you and Jamie, a chance to fight for something worthy, that's priceless. Elias Boone, are you trying to court me in the middle of all this chaos? Maybe. Is it working? She laughed, the sound like water in the desert. You face down armed men for us, risk everything for strangers, bring my grandson to healing, and now you want to know if your courtship is working? Well, when you put it that way. She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they parted, she was smiling. Yes, she said, it's working. They stayed at the healing grounds for 5 days. Jamie improved daily, the color returning to his cheeks, his appetite growing. On the 3rd day, Clay Moreland appeared with news. Hartley's gathering men, he reported, lots of them. Word is he's planning to take back what's his burn Grafton's Rest to the ground as a lesson. How many? Elias asked. Maybe 30, 40 guns, some of the worst border trash money can buy. Moreland shifted uncomfortably. There's more. He's put a bounty on you. $500. Dead or alive. Just me? You're the symbol. Kill you, scatter the rest. That's his thinking. Martha had gone pale. We should run. Take Jamie and disappear. No. Elias's voice was firm. I'm done running, and we all are. This ends now. You can't fight 40 men. Not alone. But I'm betting we won't be alone. He looked at Thomas Standing Bear. That offer of hospitality for your young men, how soon could they arrive? Thomas smiled grimly. They're already on their way. 12 warriors, eager to prove themselves. And the families in Grafton's Rest will fight, Moreland added. You stood for them. They'll stand for you. You're talking about a war, Martha protested. I'm talking about drawing a line, Elias corrected. Saying this far and no further. Either the law means something or it doesn't. Either people can build lives without fear or they can't. On the 5th day, with Jamie strong enough to travel, they returned to Grafton's Rest. The town had transformed in their absence. Ruth Hardin had organized the families into a militia. Silas Fletcher had built barricades at strategic points. The Washoe warriors had arrived and were teaching townspeople how to fight from cover. But it was the other arrivals that surprised Elias most. Throughout the day, riders trickled in, ranchers from neighboring valleys, miners from played-out claims, even some townspeople from Cedar Falls who'd grown sick of Hartley's tyranny. A word spread, Ruth explained, about what you did, standing up to him. People are tired of being afraid. By evening, they had nearly 60 defenders, armed and determined. It wasn't a professional army, but it was something more powerful, a community defending its right to exist. Moreland arrived near sunset with final intelligence. They're coming at dawn. Hartley himself is leading them. He's got Jake Harmon as his war chief, plus some Mexican bandits Harmon recruited. You staying for the fight? Elias asked. Moreland touched his chest where his badge had been. I've worn a lawman's star for 15 years. Forgot what it meant somewhere along the way. Maybe it's time to remember. That night, as they prepared defenses and checked weapons, Elias found Jamie sitting on the hotel porch, wrapped in a blanket. You should be resting, Elias said, sitting beside him. I couldn't sleep, too much thinking. About what? About tomorrow, about fighting. The boy looked up at him. Are people going to die? Elias wouldn't lie to him. Maybe, probably. That's what happens in fights like this. Is it worth it, fighting for a town? It's not about the town, Jamie. It's about the right to live free, to build something without someone stronger taking it away. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder. Your grandfather understood that. He died trying to make an honest living for his family. I wish he was here. He is, in a way, in your grandmother's strength, in the stand we're making. Elias stood. Now go rest. Tomorrow will come soon enough. Jamie headed inside, then paused. Mr. Elias, when this is over, are you going to marry my grandma? Would that be okay with you? The boy considered gravely. I think Pa would have liked you. So yes, it's okay. After Jamie went to bed, Elias made final rounds. Martha was helping load ammunition with the other women, her face set with determination. When she saw him, she pulled him aside. Promise me something, she said. If things go bad tomorrow, you'll get Jamie out, take him somewhere safe. Things won't go bad. Promise me. He saw the fear in her eyes, the mother's terror of leaving a child alone in the world. I promise. But it won't come to that. How can you be sure? Because we have something they don't. We're fighting for home, for family, for each other, and they're just fighting for pay. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it a dust cloud on the horizon. Hartley's army approached in military formation, the early light glinting off gunmetal. They stopped just outside rifle range, and Hartley himself rode forward with a white flag. One last chance, Boone, he called out. Surrender the woman and leave. Take whoever wants to go with you. I'll even give you an hour's head start. Elias stepped out from behind the barricade. Counteroffer, Hartley, you turn around and leave. Don't come back. Live with losing for once in your life. You think your rabble can stand against professional fighters? I think men fighting for their homes are worth 10 hired guns. Want to test it? Hartley's face twisted with rage. Then you'll all burn together. He wheeled his horse and rode back to his men. Moments later, the attack began. What followed was chaos. Gunfire erupted from both sides, the thunder of it echoing off buildings. Hartley's men advanced in waves, but the defenders' barricades held. The Washoe warriors proved especially effective, appearing and disappearing like ghosts, their arrows finding gaps in cover that bullets couldn't reach. Elias fought from the hotel's second floor, Martha beside him reloading rifles. Below, he could see Ruth Harden directing fire with cool efficiency, Silas Fletcher rallying defenders when they wavered. The tide turned when Jake Harmon led a charge against the main barricade. For a moment it looked like they'd break through, but Clay Moreland stepped into the gap, his guns blazing. Harmon went down, clutching his shoulder, and his men fell back in disorder. They're retreating, someone shouted. But Elias could see Hartley rallying them for another assault. This time they'd bring fire, try to burn the defenders out. He made a quick decision. Cover me, he told Martha, then slipped out the back of the hotel. He worked his way through the alleys using skills learned in years of stalking cattle through rough country. Hartley sat his horse behind his men, shouting orders, feeling safe in his distance from the fighting. Elias emerged from cover 20 feet away, his Colt drawn. Hartley! The banker spun, reaching for his gun, but Elias was faster. The shot took Hartley in the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle. He hit the ground hard, his pistol flying from his hand. It's over, Elias said, standing over him. Call off your men. Go to hell, Hartley gasped. Around them, the battle was dying down. Hartley's mercenaries, seeing their employer down and Harmon wounded, began to melt away. Professional fighters knew when a cause was lost. Within minutes, it was finished. The attacking force scattered to the four winds, leaving their wounded behind. The defenders emerged from cover, hardly believing they'd won. Doc Cartwright, who'd arrived during the night, began tending the wounded from both sides. The casualties were lighter than Elias had feared, 3 dead among the defenders, perhaps twice that among the attackers. Every death was a tragedy, but it could have been much worse. Hartley was taken into custody by a federal marshal who'd been summoned by telegraph. Marshal Pritchard, a grizzled veteran who'd been tracking Hartley's activities for months. "You've done a good thing here, Boone," Pritchard said. "This evidence will put Hartley away for a long time. More importantly, it'll make other would-be land thieves think twice." As the sun climbed higher over Grafton's Rest, Elias surveyed his town. Buildings were pocked with bullet holes, and the smell of gunpowder lingered. But the people were already beginning to clean up, to rebuild. "We did it," Martha said, finding him on the street. "We actually did it." "We did." She looked around at the families emerging from shelter, at children who would grow up free from fear, at a community that had found its courage. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we build for real this time on a proper town with law and order and hope." He took her hand. "Together?" "Together," she agreed. Jamie appeared, still pale but walking on his own. "Mr. Elias, does this mean we can stay? For good?" "For good," Elias confirmed. "This is home now." As the three of them stood together in the dusty street, surrounded by neighbors who'd become family, Elias thought again about that $100 investment. He'd bought a ghost town and found a life. He'd gone looking for solitude and discovered community. He'd thought he was running from his past, but had instead run straight into his future. Sometimes, he reflected, the best deals were the ones where you got far more than you bargained for.